Hey, right, I was due to start the Triumph Bonneville Bobber Black project with Motorn Customs this week. Unfortunately, the weather yesterday beat me, and the conditions weren't good enough for filming, so I'm going to have to attempt that again at the beginning of next week. I mean, the weather is brilliant this morning while I'm editing this, but, you know, I did toy with the idea of trying to get a quick bit of filming done. It's just not going to work. I'm going to end up rushing it, and it's not going to be what I want it to be, so it's best to leave it until next week. Just one thing that cropped up in comments, well, been cropping up over the last couple of weeks, is I've not really been putting music on my videos anymore because I get sick, basically, of people either whinging about the choice of the music or the volume of the music. At the end of the day, it's much easier for me to not put music on videos, so I've decided that's the way I'm going to go for now. Let me know if you preferred it or you like it without it. I don't really care either way. So let's get on. Now, around about a month ago, you know, most mornings I do quite a lot of research in the news just to see if there's anything relevant that I should be bringing up in my videos. I was bombarded with articles about certain government strategies over net zero, and a scheme that's due to start next year, 2024, compelling motorcar manufacturers to sell a percentage of EVs each year, and year on year that percentage is going to increase to 80% just before 2030, which obviously is the cut-off date for petrol vehicles. Now, what this means is that going forward, car manufacturers are going to have to start rationing the sales of petrol and diesel motor cars. Now, I believe the initial kick-off percentage starting next year is that 22% of all motor vehicles sold in the UK will have to be zero emissions, with, as I've said, a year-on-year increase in that number, which means that starting from next year, it's going to be increasingly more difficult for the average customer to purchase a new petrol vehicle. It's eventually going to get like trying to buy a Rolex, where you have to go on a list and you may or may not be able to buy a petrol or diesel vehicle at the end of it. You could be waiting months, you could be waiting years, you may never get one, because the demand for them is going to be higher than supply, and it's not going to be because the manufacturers can't build them, it's because the UK government is not going to allow them to build them and sell them. They're taking away the choice of the customer and forcing people to buy EVs. Now, when this bit of news first came up on my news feed, my gut reaction was to make a video on it, but then, you know, we always get the comments from people that just can't make the link between electric cars and how it's going to affect their motorcycling habits. This government strategy is obviously going to create a lower demand for petrol and diesel. So filling stations are going to start closing down, and those that do remain open are going to have to start charging more for the petrol and diesel that they sell, because they're going to start to lose the economy of scale. And I personally think that is the exact consequence that the UK government wants. That's part of the reason that they're doing this. Now, the other reason is electric vehicle sales are falling. They've faltered since the beginning of this year, and sales are not meeting the expected projections. In fact, I think Elon Musk has just sliced the price of his Teslas yet again. I think it's the 6th time since the beginning of this year, to move cars that are not selling. And of course, this is having a knock-on effect on other EV manufacturers. In fact, some EV manufacturers are pulling out of EVs altogether. Now, if you're looking to buy an electric vehicle, this is good news for you for now, but it isn't going to last. Tesla stock has taken a bit of a hit as a result of this strategy, because it's not sustainable for a manufacturer to keep doing this. But what I presume Elon Musk is banking on is that within a few years, people are going to have no choice but to buy an electric vehicle, so you can then start ramping up the price again. The reduction in prices are artificial. They shouldn't be regarded as, the status quo moving forward. Now, a few years back, and I think it was actually Elon Musk that I heard say this. I might be wrong, but it's not important. He was talking about kickstart schemes, startup schemes, and how they're an inherently flawed business model. Basically, these are business models that have failed to secure backing from investors, or they've failed to secure the necessary financial backing from banks. The reason being that the banks and the investors don't consider it to be a very good business model, so they're not prepared to put the money in it. And it's something we've all become very familiar with these days, where the owners of these business models basically beg for money from the public, or they pre-sell products that they're not even manufacturing yet, to get the money together to actually get the manufacturing in process. And from what I remember from this particular conversation that I remember listening to, these have a higher incidence of failure than any other business model, which is no surprise. But the more I think about it, that's exactly what electric vehicles are. It's a kickstart scheme. Electric vehicles have been around for a very long time, but they've failed to make significant inroads into the market because they're inherently flawed. They're suitable for a small number of customers who faithfully buy them because they work for them, but for the general run-of-the-mill customer, the businessman, the family man that needs to be able to travel distances, they simply do not work, so they don't buy them, and for that reason they've always remained a niche market. The question or debate over electric vehicles simply would not exist now if it wasn't for various governments' net zero strategies. It would never have come into the motoring conversation. It required government legislation to force them upon us. But that wasn't enough, so the government for many years started pouring money into the kitty for people that were prepared to buy electric vehicles by giving them subsidies if they bought one. Money off the price of one, paid by the taxpayer, paid by people that don't own EVs and don't want to own EVs. And then they took that a step further by abolishing road tax for EV owners. Basically, they had to bribe people to buy them. It's not sustainable long term, but they figured eventually with the passage of time, people wouldn't have any choice but to own an EV. So then they could slap all these charges back on. In fact, they already have done with the government subsidies. They were abolished last year, which sort of coincided with the slowdown in sales. And they're now also talking about putting road tax back on EV owners, which, granted, will be at, again, a subsidised rate at the expense of other road users, to encourage the use of EVs. Now, these are extraordinary measures being used by a government to defeat market forces. If it wasn't for these measures that they've taken, EVs would never have got to the stage that they're at now because they're not suitable for most people. But clearly, with the current slowdown in sales, even that has not been enough. So the government is now having to take more measures by stopping the sale of petrol cars at source. Now, it's odd, and I come across this a lot where electric vehicles are concerned. You'll get bombarded with news reports on the latest development, and then when you look 2 weeks later, they've all disappeared into the ether. They've sort of been lost into the matrix. And it often leaves you scratching your head as to whether you just imagined it in the first place. Just like with this news, what I suspect is happening is, the government doesn't like it being reported on, so it's somehow getting buried. Call that a conspiracy theory if you like. I can only go on my own experience in that 1 minute it's there, the next minute it has apparently disappeared. Now, I did still manage to find one article from the 30th of March from The Telegraph, but this is a pay-per-view service and I don't pay to view it, so I couldn't get access to the full article. All the other articles seem to have vanished. I managed to find one instance on a forum where someone had copied and pasted this, and the government's strategy goes something like this. Motorcar manufacturers are going to be given a quota each year. As I've said, the proposed figure for now, starting in 2024, will be that 22% of all vehicle sales must be zero emissions. So, during the course of the year, if a manufacturer finds that selling petrol and diesel motor vehicles, including hybrids by the way, looks like it's going to exceed 78% of their total sales, they're going to have to stop selling them and they're going to have to start putting customers on a waiting list, presumably to be allocated a car of their choice at the beginning of the next financial year. The problem is that list is going to get bigger, and of course the percentage of the quota each year is going to increase. So if in the year 2025 the percentage is increased to, let's say, 30%, that's going to increase the waiting list size for petrol or diesel vehicles or hybrids for the year 2025 and 2026. And the plan is to up that percentage every year to a total of 80% zero emissions cars by 2030. So it doesn't take a genius to work out that if this goes ahead, within 2 years it's going to become extremely difficult to buy a new petrol, diesel or hybrid vehicle. The waiting lists are just going to get bigger, and the amount of internal combustion engine vehicles and hybrids available for sale are going to get smaller. And I believe that this will probably force motor manufacturers to increase the price of their ICE vehicles. They'll have no choice, because I think it's going to considerably limit their ability to produce cars. They're going to have a cut-off point where they basically shut the factories down until the beginning of the next financial year. I don't know how they're going to manage this. Now, what the government has said is that, and this is how crazy this whole thing is getting, some manufacturers are going to be able to buy credits from other companies that are managing to sell a higher proportion of zero emissions vehicles than, their allotted quota. Now, I'm not really sure how the government's going to enforce this, because, we don't build that many cars in the UK anymore. What I think they're going to do is hit the distributors. So let's say someone like Tesla, who only builds electric cars, they're going to make a profit by being able to sell credits to other motor manufacturers so that they can overproduce internal combustion engine cars but stay within the remits of the law without imposing financial penalties from the government, because that's what this is all about. This is how they're pushing it at manufacturers. If they sell too many internal combustion engine vehicles, they're going to get fined. Now, the ramifications for the early demise of the internal combustion engine are huge. Everyone's focused on 2030. Oh, we can buy new cars until 2030. That's no problem. We can continue using the petrol or diesel cars way beyond 2030. I think you're going to find you're far more restricted than you currently believe you're going to be. They've tried legislation to kill off the internal combustion engine car, and it's not quite worked. They've tried bribery to kill off the internal combustion engine vehicle, and it's not really worked. Now they're resorting to extortion against car manufacturers, and I can't believe I live in a Great Britain where that is considered acceptable. Now, this is not as yet set in stone. As far as I can gather, the government is currently still negotiating with motor manufacturers. But one thing is very clear, despite the fact that, the cracks are starting to appear in the net zero strategies all over the world, The British government is just doubling down on their efforts to get us out of the internal combustion engine and into electric cars. They know that by and large we don't want them, but they're going to force them on us no matter what. And this latest strategy to enhance sales of unwanted EVs is without a doubt going to have an effect on the business model of most filling stations within the next 4 years. I mean, just looking around Hull where I live, about half, maybe about 30% of petrol stations have in recent years closed down, and they're either derelict now or they've become car washes. Over the next 4 years, I think we're going to see an increase in filling stations cutting down. That's going to reduce competition, and it's going to allow the last men standing, if you like, to increase or inflate their prices. So it is going to affect the motorcyclist, whichever way you look at it. Now, I will include the link to the Telegraph, because just because I've overused their free facility, it doesn't mean you have. You may be able to get access to it and read the entire article. I'll see what other links I can scrounge up, but like I said earlier on, whereas there was a plethora of information available a month ago, it would seem that the majority of that information has now disappeared into the matrix. Once again, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video and my other videos, and in doing so helping to support this channel. I really do appreciate it. You can, if you like, show your appreciation through Patreon or via the super thanks button below. Or if you'd rather not do that, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you're not already a subscriber. I will, of course, be back next week. I'll try and get that Motorn video done. So until then, please ride safely, and I'll see you soon.